Well, it's that time again, friends. Welcome to the Church Tech Today podcast. Um, Today is going to be a special event. You should mark it and put it into your diaries and journals that this is the day that you listened to this conversation with such a change agent, someone who is pivotal in the history of the kingdom. Is this a buildup or not? I'm bringing on to the show my friend Jay Kranda. Welcome, Jay. How you doing?
Dude, I'm so excited. We were talking right before we hit record just about how long we've known each other and some stuff we've done together. I'm grateful to be on and to promote my new book.
Yes.
And I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but I'm excited.
Yes, absolutely. So, Jay, for the small, dark corners of the internet of church leaders who have not heard your name or don't know who you are, could you just give us an elevator pitch of what you do? And I'd love to see how you describe your job, because there is a way that you've described your job to me versus your title that you've said to me a couple times that have resonated, and I wonder if that's still in your mind. So let's put you under the pressure. Share with us what you do, who you do it for, and what your role is.
Yeah, so I'm the online community pastor at Saddleback Church here in Southern California. SoCal native, went to Biola Talbot here and was one of the early online pastors along with you and a couple other friends that we were hired to be online pastors, whatever that meant, which early on it was primarily just, streaming, rebroadcasting on platforms like, church online platform or media social TV or whatever, you could
Yes.
figure out how to do it. And I see my job, definitely has evolved over the years, and what it look like pre-COVID, during COVID, post are all different. But we kind of leverage our online community, and one of the things that's different about my title, maybe from some others, is we don't call our online community a campus. We try to, in our model and kind of our theology and how we think about this, a campus is we see that as something primarily local. And so the reason why I'm called the online community is that we have local people, faraway people, new people engaging online. So we don't want somebody who maybe is attending our Lake Forest campus, for example, and if they're traveling sick or watching online, we don't want them disconnected from our church. And so
Right.
we see the online community as a collective of our church. And then when you get into the campus element, that means you are attending in person, or in our model online, I also oversee our small groups and our extensions, which are our house churches. And so and I'm doing, for those who are listening, it's like air quotes. If you're engaging as a campus with the online community, you're actually part of an extension or a small group. And so again, I think what's unique is we just very much, as I attend campuses all throughout Southern California. We also have international campuses that I visited. I know people watch online, and we didn't want the disconnect that if you're part of our campus, let's say in Santa Rosa in the Philippines, I don't want you thinking, if you're watching online this week, that you're somehow disconnected from your campus. We want to see the online community as a win for everybody, because digital is more of this seamless thing and not a separate thing. And so that's a change we've really leaned into over the last couple of years.
I love it. Yeah, one of the things that has resonated with me from the beginning is that you didn't see yourself as so the conversation I remember that just is burned in my brain is that you used to say that my title is like church online pastor,
Yep.
but what I really am is like a small groups pastor, a house church
Yeah.
pastor. And that's really what you think about. And then I will just say, hey, this is like jumping already, showing my cards of what I respect in you is that the difference that you had in nuances of how you host online and the language that you use wasn't, hey, come join church online. It was, how do we help you
Mm-hmm.
start a group in your neighborhood and gather people together? Like you had that little nuance of posture, I think changes everything for how you operate, how your teams operate, how your volunteers and leaders operate. And so I think that to me was super innovative. And I think that, yeah, that's part of the secret sauce of how you flourished so much in this space.
Yeah, one of the early things our church did, and this was before, my time, there was a couple other people. There was, Steve Glade and Tina Brown, a couple other people that launched online groups for our church. It was an experiment. You're going to know this platform, but it was TalkBox. A lot of our listeners are not going to know this platform. It was an embedded, like, I don't even know how it was like an iframe thing you embedded on a
It was like
URL.
the Brady Bunch,
It was the
basically.
Brady Bunch. It was, yeah, it was kind of felt like a chat roulette where you just kind of had stuff going on. But so we were an early adopter to online groups. And when I officially kind of became the online pastor, what we did was we moved the online groups and the streaming experience all under me. And essentially, I would say this thing is like, people would ask this question: how do you know your online campus or your online community is healthy? And I was like, well, if my online groups are healthy and I get people online into those online groups, my online community is healthy.
Yeah.
And to me, I kind of saw myself, and I was technically positioned early on as again, I'm at a very large church. So I was kind of like an affinity leader where we had a men's director,
Yeah.
a women's director, and then we kind of had an online group director. And I wasn't a campus. I was over some of these streams, and then I had a bunch of these online groups. And so it just, for us, it made a lot of sense that I just need to get people online into community. Now, somebody listening to this now might go, well, like, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I think you got to understand that 2010, 2011, 2013, a lot of these tools, Zoom wasn't this thing. Like
No.
video,
Yeah.
like you were still using platforms like Skype, which you had to be you had to be in a contact. And there was a lot of limitations to these things. It didn't mean it didn't exist. But I think as more users get familiar with these platforms, and that's really what happened during COVID, Zoom democratized video meetings in a way that all of us had already done. I mean, we were aware. I did actually marriage counseling in 2008 on Skype with my pastor who had moved to Florida. And I remember it was really hard, bandwidth and all these things.
Yeah.
And so for us, yeah, our church just had this unlocking of, if I could get them into community. Now, I will say that wasn't necessarily my idea. One of the things that our founding pastor, Rick Warren, said very early, and if you read Purpose Driven Church, he says he never wanted to be a televangelist. And so what I knew is that I could double, triple my online audience and it wouldn't lead to a lot of growth, because to him, fairly, he would be like, I could just tweet and do that. Like, it doesn't like that's not why we do our streaming. And he was very hesitant. And a lot of our elders were very hesitant because they didn't want an audience. And I actually talk about this in the first chapter of my book. Pastor Rick actually was super kind. He gave me some extra history of the origin stories of our streaming. But one of the things we started streaming our services in 03, 04. And at the time it was behind a password. And there were two reasons why we actually put it behind a login. And the number one reason was we didn't want, at the time, other pastors were using our church's sermon notes, and he didn't want it to be like competitive with other churches. And secondarily, it was super expensive. Bandwidth was super expensive, and we were spending thousands of dollars just to stream our services. And it just shows that I knew I could double, triple that, and it really wouldn't move the needle. But I did know if I doubled or tripled our online groups, it would actually show there was real discipleship happening online. And so we were really like, I was positioned in a good way, like, hey, focus on this. And I think that's what led to sustainable growth, and obviously our weekend attendance grew over time, but we had the model. We knew how to do it. And so it definitely was I'm really glad our leadership kind of forced my hand in those areas.
So, can you just share with us right now, like, how many people are in an online group? Like, what is that configuration typically in your mind, in that model? Like, is it like a regular small group that the mainstream church has?
Yeah. So primarily, I would say most small groups online function very similar to an in-person group. And one of the things that's different is, and this is something we kind of model a lot and teach a lot in our trainings, is that a group is going to have a home base and a meeting space. Home base, it might be a text thread, it might be a WhatsApp group, and this is where you can interact 24/7. and then you have a meeting space. And sometimes the meeting space and the home base are the same places, and sometimes it's second. It's a secondary place like a Zoom or a whatever you want to use. It could be FaceTime, it could be a phone call. We have a couple older groups that just like calling each other, and it really, for us, we very much are agnostic on how people meet. I found technology and spaces like this are very regional and generational. Like, this, because we float in this space, but like Discord is huge.
Yeah.
And I don't use Discord. Like, it's not my preferred platform, but I know I would never get in the way of how people want to meet. If you want to meet on Discord, I would go do it. And so it's like, for us, it's primarily just about getting your friends together to go through some material. And how you do that is going to be relative to what's normal for you. And so we have some younger groups that are doing primarily text-based, where they just text, where they're more, asynchronized type of experiences. And but I will say, as kind of a hack, and I have a whole chapter on how to do online groups in my book, but one of the things that I really encourage the average church leader is, one of the best ways that we launch online groups at our church is we do seasonally, once a season, primarily a large online group on Zoom, and it will be staff led or core volunteer. And what we do is it will be an hour and 15 minutes on Zoom. We'll promote it for 3 to 4 weeks. Like, hey, by the way, we're going to go through this 4-week study on Zoom. Come hang out with me or Pastor Bradley on our team. We're going to be leading this. And then what we do is we start together. We do a 25-minute hangout. You got to do all the normal stuff on online groups. You got to get people comfortable with unmuting, turning on the video. You do that by playing games, asking questions. I just did this. We had a volunteer meeting a couple nights ago of all of our online volunteers. And I opened up and I said, I prayed. And then I said, hey, what's something fun you did this summer? And one of the things, you got to warm everybody up. It's kind of like a pre-comic before the main comic. You need to get people laughing. The same thing's true in an online format, the same way as in a physical. And then what happens is we will watch a study or go through the study. And it depends on your church, your denomination. Some have video curriculum, some maybe just straight up read the Bible. Some, you might send the link prior to your meeting. Like, hey, everybody, watch this before you jump on. That's a huge change in online groups. We're doing less actually watching or experiencing something together. We're actually watching it prior to meeting. And then the meeting time online is more focused on conversation. And then one of the coolest features of Zoom is doing breakout rooms. Yeah. The idea is that, and then what we'll do is we will do breakout rooms for 30 minutes and go, okay, here's the study. For the next 25 minutes, talk about these 3 to 5 questions, and then we'll bring everybody back together. And what happens is we do that 4 to 6 weeks seasonally, and then we might have anywhere between 25 to 100 people. And then we go, by the way, you just did an online group. We're stopping this. Now launch your own. And that's one of the easiest ways to launch and scale online groups at a church. We did a similar deal. We launched this new class at our church called Activate 3. It's actually a relaunch of our former material of class 301. And we had 103 people on Zoom on Sunday afternoon, and we did 10 breakout rooms. And the idea is that you can have you think about it, if I were to lease space or rent space for 100 people like that, it would cost me, maybe $1,000. I wouldn't have 10 individual rooms. I couldn't do that in an average space. But now, just with like a $15 Zoom account, yeah, I can scale. And so and this is something I really harp on big in the book, is I think less about, I think streaming and content and all that stuff is great. But pastors and church leaders need to think more about creating spaces where the video's on and you're meeting people. And Zoom and these platforms that can do some of this cool stuff. And it's just like any skill, it's a muscle. You do it a couple of times, you get comfortable. And it's in the same ways, like, how do you build that muscle? You got to break it down and you got to build it back up. And I think with Zoom, I know you might go, I couldn't host 20 people and do breakout rooms. Yeah, yes, you can. It'd be a little weird at first, but trust me, if you can survive seminary, you can survive Zoom breakout rooms. I promise.
I love it. Let's zoom out a bit and wait, do you have a copy of your book? Can you show people who's watching this video interview?
I do.
This is the book you need to get. Online Church is Not the Answer. And that's a very provocative title, Jay.
Yes.
Can we just talk about that? Because I think What's interesting to me is Tony Morgan and the Unstuck Group just came out with their latest quarterly report, and I wrote an article over at ChurchTechToday.com talking about some of the data. And that what's interesting is we had, I mean, from the dawn of Church Online, you and I have been fighting this perception that Church Online is going to cannibalize our
Yeah.
in-person attendance, and that and maybe it's just this recognition from pastors that we're all slothful and sinful human beings, that we'd
Yeah.
rather sit in our underwear on our couch than come to church or something like that. There's just all these notions, right, of church online, that it's only for, I don't know, 40-year-olds in their parents' basement in their underwear playing games all day. And right, there's all these arguments that we've
Yep.
had. But what's interesting is, as we've come out of COVID, that then we're still, I mean, it's crazy. We're still talking about post-COVID, trying to get our people back, and that we've seen the magic of digital during COVID. Many churches kept engagement high during COVID with church online and streaming and all these other things. But now pastors are starting to think about cutting back or cutting the live streaming and cutting back on any other things in the digital ministry space because they want to focus on the in-person experience. Now, the Unstuck Group report just showed that the average church has grown year over year, I think 17% for in-person.
Oh, wow.
Online service views have grown by, it was either 32 or 34%.
Yeah.
And so what are we seeing? We're seeing really healthy growth in online interactions and
Mm.
engagement with your church ministry, but it hasn't cannibalized in person. In fact, what they're seeing is some sort of correlation in the data that says the healthy and growing churches are the ones that are investing in digital ministry, and that it's not just about streaming. So your title of your book, I think, is provocative. Can you just explain to us where did that come from? Online church is not the answer, and the subtitle is Beyond Just Streaming Church to Hybrid Disciple Making. Frame that for us. So Jay Kranda, Church Online from Saddleback, you would expect a playbook for exactly how you do church online streaming, and that's not what came out.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. So the point of the title is that pastors and church leaders think of these as separate experiences. Like, when, unfortunately, the average church leader, you have limited time and space
Yeah.
to think about these things. And so some people, they launched a church online experience at some point in the last 10 years. I remember hearing tens of thousands of people had signed up for Chop, one of the
Yes.
most popular platform during COVID. And I love what that ministry does. I love what it's about, but it stopped there. And what I advocate in my book is that digital should be this holistic integration in what you're trying to do, and not this segmented experience where it's just happening over here with your worship service, but bring it in beyond just streaming your church services and integrate digital. Like, I have an illustration that I often will share with people. Like, if you've ever mixed together like a protein drink or something like that, powdered base, sometimes it's, what churches do is that they will mix together everything they're trying to do, and then they'll add digital on top. Where I want to see it as an ingredient that's baked in, and you mix it from the beginning, and you don't see it as a separate thing. And so I just see, I don't think the average church needs to hire an online pastor. I don't think that you just need to empower and unlock the average pastor and church leader to think about digital. And yes, if you're at a certain level or size, maybe this type of person is needed. But if I'm at a church under 1,000, I'm not focusing 95% of my time on streaming. I'm thinking about online groups. I'm thinking about, maybe there's courses that should be online. Maybe there's a texting strategy. Maybe there's an ad strategy. And I'm thinking much more than just stream our worship service on Facebook or YouTube. And so, and I do kind of play, fast with this. Part of the intention, even with my cover, is that if you think about it right, you can take off that red tape on my cover, and it's like, online church is the answer. And I'm trying to play it with, like, again, the last thing I always will say is that I think really the point of this book is that there are people who get it, like, people understand it. And I think if you've grown up with digital, I use an illustration in the book about, my wife and I, we use digital to stay connected throughout the day. We send random text to each other, a gift, a reel, something that we thought were funny, but I still come home to each other, to each other. There's a reason why her and I are still under the same roof. And I think that I don't see digital as something getting in the way of our relationship, but enhancing it. But I'm also aware digital can cause problems in a relationship. And I think that's a great illustration for the average church leader to see it as not something separate or anti. I kind of poke fun of the idea that some churches are kind of Amish, where like the Amish are not, they're not necessarily anti-technology. They just see technology as something that can get in the way of their relationship with
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yes.
And I think a lot of, I want you to fully embrace it with not the fear that you're going to like lose your faith in the process. And so I think that's my hope. And really my hope was, even with this title, my hope was I would get a leader or somebody read it thinking I was on their side. And then in the process, they realize, oh, wow, no, I'm wrong. I need to be embracing. Because we've been saying this from day one, you and I, like it's the modern day Romans road. It's a
Yeah.
tool that we get to use, the idea of, a fire can, burn your house down or cook you a warm cup of coffee. And it's not an end, it's a means. And don't get wrapped up. And yeah, I think, and this is something that I really push is I think a lot of pastors were trained to get people in a room and tell them to do things. And I think as digital allowed us to scale and do ministry without people needing to be in a room, I think a lot of people got scared. No, 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 we need to protect the room. And I would say, I'm not saying the room's not a good thing. I'm just saying there might be more opportunities beyond the room. And so it's kind of that, here in America, there's that blessing and curse idea that we have tons of freedom. We have buildings. That's a huge blessing. The curse, or the double side of that, the other side of it, is now people think church is just a building. And we all know theologically that's not true. And you can make an argument that church grew the fastest when it didn't have buildings.
Yeah.
And so my point here is just to go, hey, think about it holistically and not just this segmented online church thing. And I hope in 10 years from now, people think of this cover and go, I don't even understand why that's needed. The same reason why I hope in 10 years you don't need an online pastor. It's just you have pastors and you have church leaders thinking about digital in a way that isn't this segmented streaming experience.
So that, I think, adds so much to the plate of a pastor thinking about digital and online. In your book, you actually force the question, I think, which is a really good one, is that you ask, what are you trying to accomplish? What is the big goal of everything that you're doing here, right? And then, like, does it need to be in a room? Does it need to be fully online, partial? You ask those questions. That's where you're leading to. For the average church, right? The average church is not a Saddleback. It's not even 1,000 people church.
Yeah.
Actually, I just saw a stat that I think, at least for one denomination, the average size church now is down to almost 65 people
Mm-hmm.
in attendance. There are tons of churches that are at about 100, about 200, 250 persons. What is the actual mistake do you think that they are actually making when asking those questions as it relates to digital?
Well, I think for sure there's a lot of churches, just because we're in a content driven culture now. Everything is, create content, go, go, go,
Yeah,
go. I think there's too many churches, and we have friends that kind of camp out on this too. But
yeah,
I think too many of those small churches worry about a live stream, I would say right off the bat. I think if I would tell a church of 65 or whatever, I would be like, yeah, if you can capture the audio and do a podcast capture, great. But I would rather you be creating 60-second content for Instagram and thinking about how do you encourage, because really the value of a lot of these spaces and these platforms and these tools is that your members who are showing up on Sunday, worshiping God and just going about their day, is that our job is try to help them become like Jesus and hopefully encourage them in the process. And we have the opportunity with these tools and platforms and spaces to remind them of the goal. And so I think a lot of time, a lot of the tools and the money and the resources and time is so focused on Sunday that you need to think about how do you allocate that time and limited time and resources to encourage them Monday through Saturday. So
Mhm.
for example, like I I I always remember when I was a volunteer pastor when I was in college, and I remember my pastor who was training me told me, "Hey, these students that are walking into our high school ministry on Sunday, they may have gone a week, a month, or a year without hearing that they are loved.
Yeah.
And we get to validate them and let them know that we love them and we're here and that God loves them." And now with social media, a texting strategy, an email strategy, we get to lift them up while they're scrolling or updating something. And so I just think it's too much focus on Sunday as an event. And this is why we got to stream on YouTube and we got to stream on Facebook. And like one of the blessings and curses is when Zuckerberg made streaming free.
Yeah.
Like it was an amazing thing. I know we're at one point we were spending, I remember at one point we were spending, I think up to like $7,000-8,000 a month on bandwidth. This was a
Yeah.
long time ago.
Yeah.
And now all of a
I
sudden
mean, you literally, that was a real constraint. It
it
was a
was.
concern.
It was. And now all of a sudden, any church can just stream on Facebook. What? And so again, sometimes friction can be a good thing in making you think about the value. I mean, this is why like when you give something away free versus pay, you tend to pay more attention when you pay something because there's more skin in the game. And so I think churches just turned stuff on and they were like, this is great. And it's like, yeah. And so I just want to encourage the average church. Your goal is probably to reach people in your local area and connect them to Jesus and make them more like Jesus. The question is, what tools and resources make that happen? And so like the last thing I'll say, one of the things like I echo constantly is I'll hear from churches of all sizes. How do you have so many people engaging online and doing all these things? Like,
Yeah.
for example, we have a lot of people who give online and we are a profitable ministry online. People give. And I go, well, I've been the pastor for like over 10 years, first off. So I've had a long, sustainable record of building up our community. Second
Yeah.
is that, we actually like disciple people. Like this isn't just a stream. Like I host every 6 to 8 weeks a Zoom class for people to learn about how to join our community, make commitments. We have online groups. We have volunteer opportunities. I send a weekly email. We have ways like this isn't just a stream, a TV network thing. Like this is actually a community. And so it's a reminder, like I tell the average church, if you don't have enough volunteers online, crazy idea. Once a month, have a 30-minute pastor connect on Zoom.
Yeah.
If you do that, if you just meet with 2 people every month, you stack that over 12 months,
Yeah.
you're going to have a team. So like, again, it's so much focus on top of the funnel. And top of the funnel is fun, it's sexy, and it's, there's all sorts of creative ways that, things we do. But the secret sauce is just connecting with people. And I will say it is hard to think that way because, whenever somebody will, like we've had staff over the last couple of years, get added to our team. And I go, hey, I just want to let you know, you're not going to be able to grab coffees and run into people in your community like maybe you were used to. You're going to have to be more intentional about making sure Zooms are on the counter. Like we do this
I love
thing.
that.
We started doing this a couple months ago as a test, but every other week we do a 15-minute prayer Zoom Thursday mornings at 8:30 Pacific. And it's every other week. It's just 15 minutes. It's we do it at 8:30 because I'm able to drop my oldest off at school and I can still jump on the Zoom. It's 15 minutes and we just get our volunteers together. And sometimes we have 5 people and sometimes we have 30 plus people. It's just 15 minutes prayer. And trust me, by being on video with my volunteers regularly like that, you build community. But it's really easy to think I'm building community by
Oh,
just being on video and sending an email out. But no, people need to connect with me. And so I think it's just I would challenge, I know this is a little bit of a rant, but I would just be like, think about Monday through Saturday and think about more video connect type of opportunities if you want to build into that.
I, if you hear anything from today's conversation and take it away, I would bookmark this spot in this interview and go back and listen to it again with your teammates, with your staff and your key volunteers. That one little tactic that Jay is pointing out, where just being available for relationship is, I think, a huge opportunity and a great strategic way to use digital and streaming where it's not one way, where it's not broadcast. And actually, Jay, I think your book has a couple different frameworks in it, and I believe the one framework where you have the four, is it four? Yeah, 4 or 5, 4 S's of digital.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, talk through about how you are thinking of using the same channel medium in different ways of different proximities and different interactions. Could we just walk through the four?
Yeah.
It was streaming.
Streaming, strengthening social and systems. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, like really the intention there is, again, I'm based off of the title and how people think about this, they get really wrapped up into streaming church. And there's, again, I think that those have valid points in strategy for different sizes. We invest a lot into that. We create a custom YouTube product now every week that's different than our local. And again, we can do that because of our size and some of our history and legacy. But really, the idea of the 4 S's is to kind of think holistically about what digital means for your church, because it is a loaded word. Digital, online, this can mean, I jokingly call it like the multiverse of opportunities. You can it's like going out west. You can like, where do I go? And I think with the 4 S's, it's kind of think about more holistically. So yeah, there are streaming strategies of getting your content up. That might be streaming. You could use a platform like Chop, or you can upload to YouTube, podcast. It's like more of a content strategy. And there are ways to align that are CTA like kind of focus. Like, how do you engage that audience? How do you ask them? You kind of talked about at the beginning. We used to upload at the end of our message only videos on YouTube for a while. Like, I would come up at the end, I go, "Hey, my name is Jay. I'm the online pastor." You might know what that means, but I'm here to help you get connected. If you're watching on YouTube right now, I would love to help you find a campus, find a local church, get into an online group, or even just pray for you. And I would tell them to fill out a response card. And again, there's a streaming content strategy. Strengthening S is more of these are discipleship programming things that your church does, and how do you get those digitally? So that might be a learning management software, LMS. That might be it might be a video kind of Zoom strategy. It might be something on demand. It might be something that is scheduled seasonally. And so, like, again, I would say, how do you actually disciple people? And this is where I would go to the middle of your kind of methodology of ministry of your church, and I go, okay, like a Catholic church, it would be a catechism. So I would go like, okay, why do you have catechism? Or to train them up. Okay, so if you want to build stuff out digitally, have we thought about what if people can't come to this? I was primarily raised by a single mom, and coming to a catechism class because of our work schedule and stuff was hard. And so and then this is where I would challenge you. I go, okay, so maybe what you do is the first one's in person, but if it's a 10-week thing, what if the remaining are on Zoom? Like if you have any friends, or if you know people who have done PhD programs, this is what they do a lot of times. They will do a week intensive or 2-week intensive, and then they do the rest separate. Again, like this is where you got to think about different learning styles. I did a remote learning class in college. It was Louisiana State, and it was actually, they mailed me all the paperwork, and I remember I was terrible at it. I actually didn't complete it, and but I remember I was like, I wish this would have had a community element to it. And so some people are good at or bad at it. And so strengthening is thinking about online groups. It's your classes. How do you do that in a digital component or a hybrid type of component? Then obviously social, it's being on the relevant platforms like Instagram or whatever. And I'm pretty honest, like, you got to think of it based off of your target. It might be Snapchat. It might be this. It might be whatever. Don't get so wrapped up in what I do at my church. Think about your community. And so it's going to be relative to that. And then lastly, systems. And systems is not the fun one, but your systems kind of are the underbelly of what makes all this happen. And I do think even if you're a church of 65, there are things you might be doing now that you can't do if you even added 10%. And so like you might have, for example, all your church's database on a Microsoft Word or Excel doc on your, network computer or whatever. But there are CRMs, there are giving platforms, there are content management platforms that as you double and triple, you got to think about this. This is why, they're hard. And this is why the average church, if you get on a CRM or a giving platform, you might only change that every 10, 15 years. And so you got to be very thoughtful about the systems you pick. And you might need to pull off the Band-Aid. If a system's not doing the job it needs to do, you might need to go, yeah, and it might take, moving giving systems, for example, is not for the faint of heart. It's something you got to change stuff. It takes a lot of things, but these are the things a church got to think about as you scale. So those streaming, strengthening social systems. The idea is that you're thinking more holistically about your digital strategy at your church and not just streaming.
I think this is a really critical insight or framework to think through, because it is saying that it's not binary, that online, streaming, digital doesn't serve just one purpose, right? We're using this, virtually mediated medium of the internet and digital in a way that we're serving multiple purposes, right? So if you're doing large gatherings or mass one-to-many with streaming stuff, and then the strengthening stuff gets into smaller gatherings or even one-on-one or even asynchronous stuff so that the individual has their own journey that gets moved forward. And then the social stuff is the one that is pervasive and on an everyday basis. And the systems is the really to make sure everyone has a personal experience, right? And
Yes.
that there's follow-up and there's all these things that they don't get lost in this whole journey in this
Yeah, and
ecosystem.
systems, you and I know this, systems are going to be even a bigger player moving forward with AI and a lot of these things that if you have your data in one place,
Yes.
it's going to be malleable. And so it's like, I know the average, you're not thinking about these things. And I know it's like talking about, I always jokingly, you think about like putting your credit card online, 15 years ago, people were like, I would never do that. And I would say,
Yes.
well, now you do. And so the thought is with this, you might go, I will never worry about AI. I go, no, the tools are going to be easier as Apple brings this stuff, into your own phone. It's
Yes.
going to be like, okay. And then, no, I want to be able to do this in a bigger way. This is why being on the right CRM, even though it's not fun to talk about, I do think this stuff is important. And I do think the tools will get better. And, there might be not to get too technical, but there might be a generative AI solution that comes about that's not segmented that could be very helpful. And I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful for the future. And I think these, will get better and more user friendly. I know to us, there's not something that's like, oh, I couldn't tell you go here and it's going to solve all your problems. But
Yeah.
I'm hopeful there will be something like that in the coming,
Oh, I
decades.
mean, undoubtedly it will, right? And that's our mission at ChurchTechToday.com. It's like we're helping you to build the perfect tech stack and really figure out what are the resources that God has gifted us in our world so that we can actually take marketplace best practices, ministry specific context tools, and apply them for ministry impact. Um, and again, just closing out this conversation on the four S's, I think one of the things I like about your book is at the end of each book, you encapsulate the big idea, and then you have these challenging questions. And I think the two questions in this chapter in particular is a great staff meeting or a reflection thing where you need to think through how to work on your ministry and not just get stuck working in your ministry on a daily
Yeah.
basis. And I think the questions you ask here is like, if you take these four S's, right? Streaming, strengthening,
Strengthening
social, and
social
systems. Take
systems. Yeah.
these four buckets, put them on Post-it notes and put them on the whiteboard and look at them and say, here are the questions you're asking. It's like, which of these four S's exist in our church today? So it's a good audit just to be self-aware of what are we doing with digital ministry across these four buckets and which are missing.
Yep.
And then it's a question about sequence and priority in my mind. How do we actually tackle? We can't tackle everything all together at once this week, but taking a measured approach and say one step, incremental step at a time. Which of these four S's should we tackle next, right? How might we use the tools that we have to tackle these four S's together holistically? I think this is what I love about your book is so you set it up conceptually, give some concrete examples, and then you have these tools that say, look, this is
Well,
how we might take away.
it's definitely, and I think a lot of, I kind of hate the idea that people think like I'm a guru because I think
You're my guru, Jay. You're my guru.
okay. Well, you and I know this, that we're learning something new every day
Yeah.
about these tools and spaces. And one of the big challenges that I do kind of push this is why I have one of the appendixes has 25 questions for you to wrestle through, but it's to really cast the vision of like how to think about it and really empower each staff volunteer member to come up with solutions. We need a collective of people thinking about who know your community, who know your church, and have the vision of how digital can be leveraged. And you don't have to be the guru. You can be the one asking the questions. I mean, one of the ways I function primarily is I like pitching the idea, and then I'm okay with everybody tearing the idea apart because I learn through critique like that. And so I think my encouragement is like, you don't need to be the expert. You just need to be the one that has the framework, like of what's possible. And I think I think a lot of churches, what you need is you need to empower, obviously me coming from a Protestant perspective, I believe in the priesthood of all believers. Like I'm like, empower the people in your church. You're the pastor. You do not need to have the answer. You just need to go, this is how we think about digital. It's a means, not the end. What's possible? And guess what? They may have a Kenny in your church who can help you solve these problems. And
Yeah.
I remember one of my first ministries that I was kind of part of at Saddleback was we had an advertising marketing ministry that was kind of underutilized at the time when I kind of came in. And I remember I put together this event, and I wasn't a marketer advertiser. Like I was just straight out of, Bible college. And I remember I got in this room and we had 3 people in this room that were like head marketing experts for big companies that people here would recognize. And I just remember going like, this is crazy. These people go to our church.
Yes.
Why are we trying to create ads? Why aren't we leaning into them? And I know you might go, well, no, we don't have, 20,000 people or whatever. No, but like even in a room of 65 people, I bet you have a small business owner who's
Yes.
gone through the pains of this. And it's just like, but this is why it's just like, how do you empower people? And people just need to know that digital is a tool your church wants to wield. And they need to know how to think about it strategically. And really, I lay out a couple of approaches. And again, your church is going to be different. You may be a little bit more rigid on some of this stuff. That's okay. That's your theology. That's your method. God's using a bunch of different strategies. The same ways there's things we won't do online. And I have friends that do stuff online that I wouldn't do. And I see them as missionaries. Like they're doing something completely different. And I would encourage you is just cast the vision for your church and allow people to step up to use their giftings. And I bet you have people that are gifted. One of the things I joke is like, churches will say like they want to be better at YouTube or Instagram or whatever. And I go, just stand up on a Sunday and say like, if you have more followers than us on Instagram, could you help us out? Like
Yeah.
something as simple as that. Trust me. And
Yes.
if you have a 14-year-old that shows up, guess what? They know it better than you. The same way as when I talk to my kids, they know more about Roblox and Minecraft and all the, like, I don't
Yes.
know, like, I don't play these, but I watch them play it. They joke with me I make a joke about Fortnite, and it's like, but if I want to learn, I got to lean into them, and I got to figure out because I'm already aged out on this. I may still think I'm relevant, but I'm not.
We're good at dad jokes. That's what we're good at. We're
Yes, we
good at
are.
dad
We are.
jokes.
I'm really good at dad jokes.
So I'm going to close out this conversation with a question. That appendix you talked about. So you have 25 great questions. Again, perfect for teams. Buy a copy of this book for everybody on your team. Read it, and you can discuss it together. Even if you don't have church online right now, I think this is not a church online book. This really is a ministry book for 2024, 25, and beyond. And I love this one question. This is the one that I highlighted and stood out to me, Jay. I haven't even told you about this one. So here's the question. The question that everyone here has to write down and get a copy of the book for this is, can you get everyone with influence in your church? So it's your staff, your key volunteers, your elders, anybody that is part of your core community, right? Can you get everyone with influence in your church into a room and almost separate the prisoners, right? Heads
Yeah.
down with your own
Yeah.
paper, no cheating, all right? And can you draw out your own discipleship pathway for the church? Can everyone agree and draw out that pathway for themselves and then trade notes? This is where I love it, Jay, because you don't see yourself as a digital pastor. You are a pastor, a discipleship pastor, and this is where I love this. So do that. And then the second part of the question is figure out what digital can help amplify. This is, I think, you ask the questions of all the people in the room, of the people that have
Yeah.
talents and gifts and people that are invited into helping build up this ministry together. What can digital help amplify? And even what areas digital should not touch, should never
Yep.
touch? Can you have an honest conversation about this? And can you do it without needing that external guide to navigate you through the tough questions for your church? I think that is probably one of the most significant things that you can do taking out from this book to do for your ministry to set you up for success in this next season ahead. Wherever you are in your season of ministry, that's the one question I think will give you the contribution to the most impact and growth.
I wanted to, so one of the reasons why that question's in there is, and it's actually one of the reasons why I ended up writing the book was, I've been super fortunate to be able to be in my role for long periods of time. I've also been fortunate where I've worked with orgs all around the world, to be able to unstuck some of their digital strategy. And I remember I was in a room with a big church, I think it was in Texas, and, they had paid me, I had flown in, I had spent, 2 days with them. And I remember I was so frustrated to think the average church, I can't scale my time. I can't even do much stuff like that because of some of my responsibilities. And it honestly just costs too much money for the average church to even do something like that. And it was frustrating that this exercise of getting everybody in the room, because that's essentially when you're coaching a church, you just get everybody in the room and then you're like the guide. You just go, why not? And a lot of times you're asking questions and pointing out things people in the room already know, but nobody has the authority to be able, and as an external guide, I have the authority and credibility in that moment to push back with everybody. And so really the point of that question, the point of the book is to go, hey, for, $15 you can get me and you can move this forward. And that's really my prayer is that you ask that question. Because I do think I love that you zeroed in. That's the question, because you just need to have everything on the table and just figure out your red lines. And I would tell the person, you might go, well, I wish we could do this online. And I tell people privately all the time, like, just be a good steward of the things you can do in this season. And trust me, that red line might move. And I've found that. And so I really hope churches do that exercise. And again, this is not just paid staff. It's volunteer leaders. It's everybody. And just be honest. You got to have, it's like a come to Jesus. Like somebody might go, I remember we had a conversation like this at one point during COVID, and one of our elders at the time, we were having a conversation like this. And we were kind of talking about moving more digital with our program.
Yeah.
Like notes thing. And I remember very wise gentleman, amazing dude. He said, I don't want people pulling out their phones and getting distracted in service. And he was coming from, he was 60 plus, he had this perspective. And I remember I just challenged it, in a very respectful way. But I was like, I told him, I said, there's two ways to think of this. There's one way is like, yeah, the phone is really distractive and we don't want to bring it into our worship service. The other way is they have their phones all the time with them. And what if we use this moment to help them use it better? So what if instead of just say, hey, our notes are on the phone, what if we said like, hey, by the way, you can access our notes on our phone, pull it out. By the way, I know there's a ton of stuff, red notifications, distraction. You can add stuff to your cart on Target or Amazon for the next hour. Can you just lock in with us? And we use it as a discipline. Again, we can be Amish about it and we can like be anti it, or we can lean into it and help them rein in this distractive device. And I think this is why you just need to, and I'm so grateful my church could have that conversation. I'm grateful I was allowed to be in the room. And again, he said some things. I was like, okay, I got to think about that. Like that's a good push on the moment, but you need to have that conversation. And I think the average church can have that conversation without needing an external guide,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That one side note, I just coached a pastor in the announcement, in the hosting at the very beginning of announcements, to teach people to put their phones in focus mode so that the notifications are off.
That's a great point. I love that.
And I will say probably the majority of the public have no clue what that is and how it's used and what the benefit is. And again, if you just teach people and equip them, instead of just telling them to pay attention to the church, but equipping them to figure out how to use this time in a sacred manner to focus, I
I'm
think
gonna
there's
say that this weekend. I'm
yes,
stealing that from you.
please. Yes, I would do a video to show them what focus
Yeah.
mode is, right? Well, anyway, so I love the book. I really I think when I'm reading it, I feel like I'm sitting down with you, and I feel like
Mm.
it's one of those things early on, over 10 years ago, we met each other, where it was like, hey Jay, and I'm sure you get calls like this all the time, right? Can you tell me how you do church online at Saddleback? And you even have a chapter that literally walks through what we do at Saddleback. And you literally talk through, this is our structure, this is how we do it. And it feels like you just captured the essence. It's almost like someone took notes in that meeting, condensed it down, got rid of all the fluff, got rid of all the portions where it says, hey, you're on mute, you're on mute. You just like deleted that from all the transcripts. And you condensed it down to all the good stuff of what we would do if we sat down with you and just you shared your experience and your mistakes and your wisdom, everything combined to share, hey, this is how we're doing it. This is an opportunity for you. Um, so thank you for codifying all this
Thanks, man.
and
No, that means
sharing
a
with
lot.
leaders.
And by the way, while I was sitting here, I got notified that you bought my book. I
Yeah,
finally
I
got the
mean,
notification. So which is funny. Like
so
as we're
tell
talking,
people, so it's available wherever books are
yeah,
sold.
it's on
But
Amazon. There's an audio book. There's all that. You also can buy team bundles on my website if you wanna go through it. You don't have to buy individual books. You can buy it for a discount, the audio and the
yes.
PDF.
And,
So
and this is why I'm going to jkranda.com to buy it, because you can get the book, but also the audio book as well, the MP3.
yeah.
And I have the luxury of I've spent over 5.5 hours with you, Jay, personally.
Yeah.
But anyone listening, you can too, because the MP3 is 5.5 hours of reading the book, and you can spend personal time with Jay Kranda, the one and
And
only, the
and tag
guru
me.
of church online.
So I want to hear if you're listening to this or watching this and you go through my audiobook, message me. How did I do? Because I just heard from a friend. They said that it was good, but I was more lively in conversation than I was on the audio. So I want to know, because I will say recording your own audiobook, it's a tricky thing. It was a learning curve, and there's some I very much enjoyed it, but I would love to hear feedback. What do people feel about the audio?
Awesome. So jkranda.com, everyone should go there and buy it right now. Buy multiple copies for everyone on your team. If you are listening to this and you're not the pastor, buy a copy and gift it to your pastor. This is one of the best Christmas gifts that you can give this year, hands down. And I will say, Jay, you're great you publish a lot and you expose a lot, and you're not one of those internet gurus that's trying to nickel and dime and sell everybody everything. You share so much of your secret sauce online and are accessible. Tell us a little bit about, like, what are your social channels? Where should we be following you? And what are some of the pieces that, outside the book, what's the next place that they should, go to find some of the good stuff that you're putting out there?
Yeah, I try to post on I definitely my website, like I link to my Instagram and YouTube. I'm trying to do more shorts on different content. So if it's like, a lot of us talked about, Bridgetown stopped live streaming, and I unpack, why that might be a good decision.
Yeah.
Or Ryan Berg just did a post about breaking down a Pew Research study about pretty much like people watch online and it's not really hurting physical. They do both simultaneously. So I'm always trying to I'm doing a lot more 60-second content because it is a little easier to do than writing. Writing's hard. But I might do more writing since this book is actually done, because I've been driving myself nuts with editing and editing and reading, but a lot on Instagram and YouTube. So please check out those channels. Links all on my website. And I would love, and again, if you go through the book and there's something that's encouraging, you got a thought, please message me on Instagram. I would love to. I'm kind of in that early stages of you work on something so long, you're not sure if it's good or not. And so you're
Oh,
like, so I would love to hear feedback. So
I will validate the book all day long.
mm,
It really is a great piece. So, yeah, I would love for everybody to just spread the word on the book. And I think one of the things that we have here at ChurchTechToday.com is we are trying to foster these conversations. This is part of our mission. This is why I love bringing Jay on, because the mission, what Jay is doing and what we have at Church Tech Today is very much aligned. And it's not to put digital in a silo,
Yep.
but to show you that this is pervasive and the relevance has, it is something that every single ministry front today really needs to start to think through if we are going to really reach more people for the gospel and be heralds for the gospel in our own zip code.
Amen.
It is very practical to really use these tools. And it's not just the super influencers with millions of followers, that every single church can reach more people online in driving distance of your church by using these strategies. So again, thanks for hanging out with us today, Jay. If I can twist your arm and just get your commitment to come on again sometime in the future, I'm gonna guilt you into it. If there's a right place for guilt in this culture, this is it. We need more Jay Kranda.
You and I on the next episode, we got to talk more about the friend stuff. You and I can have a fun conversation about, because we follow it all, and you know more of it than me, but it would be fun to talk about some of the crazier stuff, because I do have a chapter about the future a little bit, and it would be fun to dive into that with you and kind of see where we go, because you and I are good at debating back and forth. So
yes, that's a promise. You heard it here. And we'll be back soon here on the Church Tech Today podcast. Thank you for joining me, Jay Kranda at jkranda.com, and Kenny Jang. I will see you here next time on the podcast.